Hey, what's up everyone, my name is Sean, and in today's video I'm going to be doing a follow-up from yesterday's video of building Odd Eyes from Master Rule 5. So, since yesterday's video I've done a lot of testing with this deck. I'm very proud of where it is now, so let me show you my final build for Odd Eyes. Now a lot of cards and a lot of things were changed with this deck, and a lot of things were added, so let's go through them. I'm going to first talk about what we took out. I took out the Pendulum package here because these cards were in there originally because they're searchable via Duelist Alliance, and I didn't just want Duelist Alliance to search just one card, so they were originally in there for that. However, I forgot and realized that Luster Pendulum is not a generic tuner. It says in its effect, you cannot special summon Fusion, Synchro, or XE monsters using this card as material, except Draco Slayer monsters. So that didn't really work for me. I ended up taking it out. So we ended up taking out the 3 copies of this, the 1 copy of that. And even though these cards are still really good, I really like the Draco Slayer cards, I ended up taking out Dynasty Power, Ignis to Prominence, and Magister Paladin. So those went out, and the next thing which I realized I wasn't doing very much was I didn't really actually need to rely on Supreme King Dragon Darkworm too much. There were times where I just draw this card and ended up normal summoning it, and yeah, it's a good card, and Supreme King Gate 0 is really good. However, there's you don't really need to rely on sending it to the graveyard. So I ended up taking out Foolish Burial, Dragon Shrine, and Dragon Ravine because it just wasn't being used that much. Speaking of which, Pendulum Halt was also not being used that much. It just activates way too late. You have to have 3 cards in your Pendulum deck, in your extra deck that's face up, before you can use this card, and by then I kind of already had where I wanted to be. This card felt very more what we call win more, and yeah, it's just not what you needed for this deck. It's too slow, so we ended up taking it out. I took out also Upstart Goblin just to make room for a couple of other cards that we added, and I'll get to that later. But I also took out Performance Power Odd Eyes Metal Claw, Rune Eyes Pendulum Dragon, and Dissolver. I realized Dissolver is actually more of a brick than I had anticipated it to be. The effect of being able to summon itself when a card is when your Pendulum monster battles just doesn't come up very often. And what would often happen? I would have this card in my hand, and I just couldn't use it. It can't be Pendulum summoned because it's level 8. Its scales are terrible. Its Pendulum effect is okay, but I never ever really needed it to fusion summon anything with. In fact, the most way I fusion summoned was using Odd Eyes Absolute Dragon, so this card was cut along with the 2 fusion monsters here. Another thing I realized with these 2 cards was the only other time I summoned out Metal Claw was when I used Gate 0's effect, and it summons a dragon whose attacking effects become 0 and has his effects negated. And then I realized there's no real point of doing that with these 2 cards because they can't be used for anything except a link summon. So I ended up actually adding more Vortex Dragons because they're level 7s, and you can actually use them in different ways, such as making a rank play as well as a link summon. I also took out Zephyr Metal Drawn. This card is just not necessary. It just yeah, just never used it really, never needed it, never had a point in time when I was really like, man, I want to Pendulum 3 cards back. Just wasn't really needed, and so I ended up taking it for cards that I was actually using. So what did I add into the deck? So the first thing which we added into the deck, and I'm going to actually sort these by type. The first thing I ended up adding to the deck to work with Duelist Alliance still, so we still had Caster Search. The first thing I added was Pendulum Call. Pendulum Call requires you to discard 1 card, but can add 2 different Magician monsters that are Pendulum cards from your deck to your hand. And so this replaced the Luster Pendulum package because we added up a little Pendulum Magician package. Now I think this package is way superior than the Luster Pendulum package for many reasons. First of all, it allows us to play Harmonizing Magician, and Harmonizing Magician, when she is Pendulum summoned, lets us special summon any Magician Pendulum monster from our deck to the field. Now we've got a little toolbox here, so we can get a level 4 to the field if you want to make a rank 4. So you got your Black Fang, your Purple Poisons in order to do that. We've got a level 7 here you can summon if you want to make a rank 7 with Dragon Pit. If you want to Synchro summon, you can get a level 4. And yeah, and you can use any of these for a link summon as well. So Harmonizing is really good. But there's also synergy between Purple Poison's effect and Sky Iris and Gate 0, in that when this card is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can target a face-up card on the field and destroy it. And this card can do really could do with some more removal as help. So this is just another option. If you don't really need to use Odd Eyes Art Pendulum's effect and you don't want to destroy an Odd Eyes card, you can alternatively destroy this instead and then destroy a card on the field. So that's really, really nice. Black Fang and Dragon Pit aren't that good, to be honest. They don't have a lot of relevancy for a deck like this. They're more suited to Magician based decks, but they are scale 8s, which is really nice. And by adding these two in, we've increased the number of low scales and high scales we have. With high scale cards, we now have 9 high scale cards with high scale 8s, and for low scales we have 8 low scale cards that are low scale 0 or low scale 1. So that gives us a little bit more consistency to the deck. We can flex a little bit. If you say you don't want to use one card but you have another option, you can kind of like play around with that a bit more. So it's just nice to do that. So yeah, that's the Pendulum Magician package. I think it's just way superior than the Luster Pendulum stuff for this build. Now, as well as that, I felt like this deck could just do with some generic draw power. This deck can work really, really well, but sometimes you just need to fix your hand, or you just need a couple more cards just to kind of do what you want to do. And so I added in 2 copies of Allure of Darkness, because you've got loads of dark monsters in this deck here that you can just draw and then banish one. And then I also added in 2 copies of Pot of Desires. I don't really care for Desires much, and this deck does kind of like to grind a bit, but it doesn't like to grind too much. And again, sometimes you just need a couple more extra cards to help you push for the win, and Desires can get you there and then end the game. So yeah, so I think the main deck is a lot better now. But let's talk about the extra deck. Now, in this extra deck, one thing I realized that I was doing almost every single game was using Absolute Dragon. This card was used so much. In fact, I rarely used Odd Eyes Fusion. I never really used it. I almost always used Absolute Dragon. And so Absolute Dragon was able to go through Vortex Dragons very easily. And so I've added actually 2 copies of these so that we have 2 different ways to summon the same card. Because Vortex Dragon is just that damn good. It bounces a monster and it has a negate. It's just a really, really good card. Instead of Ignister, we're now playing Draco Berserk of the Tenny, which is just another really powerful Synchro 8. Mainly you want to go for Borrowload Savage, but if you haven't got a Link monster in your graveyard, you can't really use his effect. So we have Draco Berserk of the Tenny to do a similar but different job instead, where his effect is when an opponent's monster effect activates, you can banish it, and then if this card destroys an effect monster, this card gets the attack of that effect monster it destroyed and can attack again during that battle phase against the monster. Pretty good, pretty busted, can end you games, and it's just really powerful. For our rank 4 package, I added a copy of Tornado Dragon, just so we had a bit more flexibility, so you could choose what you want to go for. If you want to get rid of back row cards, there you got that. And then there was one situation where I ended up in a game where I really needed non-targeting removal to deal with a card. And so, instead of Zephyr Metaltron, I added in Blackluster Soldier of Chaos, and added 1 more copy of Erratic Seal of the Heavenly Spears. Erratic Seal I made almost also every single game. This card is so good, and it just takes 2 dragons, and then during your opponent's turn you have a way to bounce back a card from their field that doesn't target, and then you can summon another dragon from your deck. And you can go easily follow up plays by going into Persona Dragon so you have another negate, or go into Mirage Dragon so you can protect your own cards from being destroyed. So this card is really good, so I actually wanted to play 2 of these now because that's how good they are. And then Blackluster Soldier of Chaos is just an absolute powerhouse. You have so many high level monsters that you can use to make this card. He can banish cards on the field, he doesn't target when his effect goes off. Just an absolute beast. So this is the deck now. I feel like this deck is so much better than it was. We're now going to go to some gameplay and I'm going to show you what this can do in action. Right, so let me show you what Odd Eyes can do in action. I chose this game out of all the ones I did because it didn't end in 1 turn. When you're playing Pendulums, you've got to get used to a lot of your games just end in 1 turn. And that's just the way the deck is. So this opening hand, I have 1 Art Pendulum Dragon, 2 Purple Poisons, and 1 Sky Iris. Opening with Art Pendulum Dragon is always really nice. So we played Summoner's Art, and we had the option of either going for Dragon Pit, or we could go for another Art Pendulum Dragon. I'm going to go for another Art Pendulum Dragon because we're going to try and destroy it and trigger one of their effects. So Art Pendulum Dragon is always really nice. It's really important to get to. It isn't make or break. You don't always have to rely on this card in order to win your games, but it can be really helpful to get cards out of your deck. Just sometimes with something which I could practice a bit more is working out which card to use for the effect. Like right now, so what I'm thinking right now is I have one level 7 monster in my extra deck. I have 2 level 4s in my hand. What can I use with these cards to make something happen? So we use Sky Iris's effect to add a low scale card, because I don't want to use any of my other cards in the Pendulum zone. So I went and got Persona Dragon because it's a scale 1. And now we're going to use Art Pendulum Dragon's effect to summon out another level 7 from our deck to the field. You can see the Solver's in there. This is the duel that I decided to take the Solver out, because he just wasn't really doing a whole lot. And yeah, we're going to go with Oda's Phantom Dragon. But I still don't really know what the best level 7 is to use when you just want to make a rank 7 monster. If there was an Odd Eyes card which, say, had a graveyard based effect, that would be really cool to use. But I don't really think there's a level 7 one that does. So you just go with what you have access to. And yeah, I don't think there's really a right answer for which one you go from there. So we now are going to do our Pendulum Summon, and we're going to summon out one Odd Eyes Art Pendulum Dragon, and we're going to summon out our 2 Purple Poison Magicians. And deciding what board to make is always really difficult when you're playing blind first in Pendulums, because you want to make a board that has the ability to counter your opponent. Now, most Pendulum decks try to get Omni Negates, which aren't too generic. Things like in Endymions, you have Endymion Mighty Master of the Magic that can negate any spells or traps, or Jackal King that can negate any monster effects. Whereas this deck doesn't have that luxury. You have to kind of just make a call and go for something, and go for a guess. So we're going to use our 2 rank 7s to make our Absolute Dragon. And Absolute Dragon is an MVP. I make this card so many times. It's so easy to make, and then you can get your Vortex Dragon as well. Now, what you often do with this card is you can often use it for a Link Summon, and if I had another dragon on the board, I would have probably gone for Hieratic Seal of the Heavenly Spears, which I normally do. I normally go for that. But the other cards on the field are Spellcasters, so I had to kind of decide what to make with them. And so I decided, you know what, most decks in this day and age are graveyard based and have graveyard based effects, so Dweller is always a safe choice to make. So we're going to try and end our board on Absolute Dragon and Dweller. You may have also just noticed that in my extra deck I had Predaplant Verte Anaconda. I took that out. I never really used Verte Anaconda, never really needed to use it. Yeah, just never really came up, so that card went out. Hieratic Seal of the Heavenly Spears is just much better, and I ended up using that card way more. So we're now going to pass to our opponent, Coco-chan or Kako-chan, and we're going to see what they are playing. And they're going to play Moray of Greed, which tells me he's playing a water-based deck. Water-based monsters are very powerful nowadays. They have so many crazy combos. They do have a but they do have a tendency to be bricky sometimes, but they are also incredibly good. And we're going to just turn up the music a bit so that you guys can hear the music. I noticed that the music in my videos have been quite quiet recently, so I was just being aware of that. So he activates Aquarium Stage. Aquarium Stage has an effect where water monsters cannot be destroyed by battle by non-water monsters. And as you saw in my deck profile, most of my monsters are actually dark. So yeah, Aquarium Stage is not what we want. And now he summons an old school favourite card of mine, Mother Grizzly. I haven't seen this card actually been played in a long time. She activates when she is destroyed by battle. She can summon a water monster from their deck. And fortunately we have a Abyss Dweller on the field, so we're not going to have to worry about that too much. So in our draw phase here, we go to draw, and we ended up hard drawing into Phantasma Dragon. See, Phantasma Dragon is also kind of bricky, and now that I've got the Pendulum Magicians in this deck, you might not actually really need to play this card. It has a really powerful effect, but it's also really slow. So what we're going to do here first is I'm now going to use Sky Iris' effect, and I'm going to use it on my Absolute Dragon, because Absolute Dragon has a graveyard effect. And my opponent's now going to chain with Icebarn. Icebarn has an effect where it says if a non-water monster is normal or special summoned while you control a water monster, change that to defense position. And that sucks because it's going to stop us from trying to kill our opponent this turn. So I I have to try and play around my monsters being in defense position. So I would have gone for something a little bit more offensive, something like an Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragon would have been perfect here, but instead I'm going to have to play conservatively, so I'm going to go for Mirage Dragon instead, because he has a defensive effect and we can use him to protect our monsters for a turn while it's on the board. Arc Pendulum is now going to activate, and Arc Pendulum is going to let us special summon a card from our from our deck, but Odd Eyes Absolute Dragon is also going to activate, and that's going to let us summon a card from our extra deck. So we're going to go and get Vortex Dragon to the field, and we're going to summon it. It doesn't matter if we summon it attack, it's going to get Force of Defense anyway. And yeah, Vortex Dragon is a really good negate. And so the game plan right now is put your cards on the board, survive one turn, and hopefully they live for you to get there to them in the next turn. Alternatively, we can also try and make a Link monster, and Link monsters can't be forced into defense position, so there is always that as an option. So we summon back an Arc Pendulum Dragon. Again, this is another situation where I just really didn't know what to summon. I wanted a high level monster, but at the same time, yeah, I just went for Arc Pendulum in my graveyard to bring that back as a resource. Probably should have got something from the deck, but it doesn't really matter. I am planning to attack this turn, and it doesn't really matter what monster we summon with Arc Pendulum, because it's going to get linked off anyway. So Icebarn is now going to trigger, it's going to turn our monsters to defense, and I just used a Abyss Dweller so that when Mother Grizzly is destroyed, she won't activate with her graveyard based effect. And now we're going to use Nightmare Phoenix to link our two cards, and we're going to send Dweller to the graveyard and Absolute Dragon to the extra deck. When I first built this deck, I wasn't playing Nightmare Phoenix, but it's just too good not to have because it's a great form of removal. The only thing I don't like with Nightmare Phoenix is her arrows. Her arrows are awful. We can't pendulum summon to those. What the hell are those arrows for? They're good for co-linking, but yeah, they're really, really bad for pendulum summon, so I didn't want to play this card, but it's still necessary. Just generic spell and trap removal is always good sometimes. So, Nightmare Phoenix is going to destroy one of our spells and traps on the field, and we're going to destroy Aquarium Stage. Even though Icebarn has been more of a nuisance, Aquarium Stage has protected this monster from being destroyed by battle, and we need to attack this turn and make use of Abyss Dweller's effect. And so, we're going to go ahead and do that right now. So, Phoenix is going to attack into Mother Grizzly, and that will destroy her, and her effects will not go off, and we don't have to worry about that. Now before we end this turn, and we're going to go into main phase 2, we're just going to try and put as many defensive cards on the board as we can. And so we're going to go for a Pendulum Summon. I'm just going to Pendulum Summon one monster, and we're going to summon out the card in my hand to the field. So here comes Mirage Dragon, and Mirage Dragon is really nice to have on the field because it has a protection style effect, and will make sure that a card that we have won't get destroyed. I can use it on itself to stop it from being destroyed by a battle, or I can use it on Vortex Dragon. I'll decide later on. And so yeah, we're probably going to just pass here and move on to our opponent's turn, because there isn't a whole lot we can really do. I really want to summon that Blackluster Soldier, but I don't want to get rid of my negate with Vortex Dragon, so we're not going to summon that. We're going to leave that alone for now. So, on to Coco's turn, or Caco's turn, and Caco will draw a card, and let's see what they try and do here. It looks like they're trying to play some really heavy water-based control deck. I think they probably got some kind of sneaky combo. Waters always do something jank and crazy, so you can't sleep on them. They just find ways to kind of like be like, wow, I wasn't expecting that kind of a response like that. So, the plan here is really just survive, and then next turn go for game. So he goes to summon Royal Swamp Eel, which is a fish tuna, and because it's a water monster, it won't get turned to defense. And then he's now going to end the main phase, and he is going to go to battle phase. So he is attempting to destroy Odd Eyes Mirage Dragon, and I was thinking to myself, you know what? He probably wants me to use Mirage Dragon on itself to protect it, because he's going to try and destroy Vortex Dragon. So we're not going to do that. We can protect Vortex Dragon from being destroyed and keep that alive, because if this card is destroyed, Arc Pendulum is going to trigger, and we'll get another Odd Eyes card anyway. and that's exactly what we're going to do. But unfortunately, Kirko-chan decides to just rage quit and leave it. But hopefully, guys, this has been a good display of what Odd Eyes can do. They are a very, very good deck. I actually really enjoy playing them. But now it's time for me to move on to another deck profile as requested by my subscribers. And if you have a deck you would like to request, feel free to let me know in the comments, and hopefully, eventually, I'll try and get to it. Thank you guys as always for watching. I'll see you soon. Take care.